Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. When it comes to police accountability and legislative changes, we need to make sure that we do it right. We cannot create laws that hinder the ability of law enforcement to do their jobs, that are detrimental to public safety, that cost the lives of those who are sworn to protect and serve. We have an opportunity to engage the stakeholders, learn about the things that I mentioned, and make sure that what we do in policy does not create unintended consequences. Madam Speaker, as we heard in testimony in the committee, law enforcement professionals in Oregon have committed to working with the legislature on these issues. I hope that as a body, we can acknowledge that the vast majority of police officers do a very good job. There are men and women of integrity who got into one of the most difficult and dangerous professions there is in order to serve their communities, protect citizens, and help people. They do their job under the most difficult of circumstances, a job that very few are called to do. They are the ones who run toward the danger, not away from it. Police work is one of the very few professions where good people endure ridicule and criticism when the few bad cops in the profession, no matter where in the country, bring discredit on the profession as a whole. Let's not let the bad tarnish the badge of the good. Let's work on realistic police reform, listen to all sides, and make wise legislative decisions going forward. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
So years ago, back in the mid-'80s when I started my law enforcement career, I was in a conversation with an officer one day. I don't know, it had something to do with the integrity of our policing, something that had or hadn't happened. I don't remember if it was good or bad. And I remember him saying to me, check out law enforcement across this country. Oregon doesn't have it perfect, but Oregon has it pretty good as far as policing themselves. Not perfect, but pretty good. And I did. I started looking around different states because, frankly, I wanted to be a cop in a big city far away. So I applied for Portland Police Bureau. I applied for Seattle PD, NYPD, LAPD. I was recruited by Dallas, Texas, because that was what I wanted to do. That's not where I ended up. Ended up in a small county. And as I went through that process, I realized that policing is different. Not earth-shattering news here. Policing is different everywhere. And there are a lot of states that look at Oregon to increase their accountability and effectiveness. Does that mean Oregon always gets it right all of the time? Nobody always gets it right all of the time in anything that we do. So striving to be better, I commend this bill for that process. I would encourage those that will be a member of this group in doing this work to show up and to participate and actively engage when we're invited to the police academy to experience things. Show up. I've done that in lots of other areas because I didn't know and I wasn't familiar. I'd encourage you to ride with a Portland cop, but don't forget to ride with a deputy in Eastern Oregon or a police officer in a department of 3 people. I'll remind you that when I was hired by the Grant County Sheriff's Department, I was the patrol division, the criminal division, the traffic division, the evidence officer, dog control, everything else. I was the one deputy. You cannot take a Portland or a Salem experience and translate that when you have one deputy. So I encourage the folks involved in this work to get out and experience and understand. It's amazing how many times when I've experienced things that we don't do in R-Scio, and I'm not talking police work, I'm talking anything. We don't do it in R-Scio because it's just not how we do things. I've gone someplace else, it's like, that's why you do that. Wouldn't make sense in R-Scio, but it makes sense for you, and to acknowledge that our differences are okay. I'd also encourage you to look at what works well. What works well. We're looking at some legislation today, some of which really hasn't been a thing for years. But look at what works well and call it out. Just call it out. Cops are like anybody else. Once in a while, they like to hear you did a good job. And by the same token, don't be afraid to call out what doesn't work well. And instead of just focusing on this is bad, even if it is bad, focus on help me, those of you that are doing this thing that I think may be bad, help me figure out how to do it differently. Because cops are the ones with the tools that are being used. I've said this for years and years, and I will continue to say this probably till the day I die. Nobody has more contempt for a bad cop than a good cop. I encourage an aye vote on this bill.
It's really discouraging that only 1/3 of the police agencies in our state have decided to become accredited and have an outside body determine they were following best practices. And I say all that because as with any profession, there are always opportunities to improve and raise the bar. This police accountability legislation, the bill today that we're considering right now, and the others we will consider later, is an opportunity to move us in the right direction. Specific to this bill, I am very pleased to see a joint committee be established to talk about improving transparency into investigations and complaints about the behavior of police officers. I'm very pleased to see that we want to examine policies that reduce the prevalence of serious physical injury or death caused by the use of police officers. And then I'm also encouraged to see that we want to determine the most appropriate policies for an independent review to ensure that we are being transparent and ensure that we can follow best practices in the state of Oregon with our police officers. I did not become a police officer just because it was a job and I needed a job. And I would suggest most police officers have the ability to go do other things and be very successful in those jobs. There's something innate, similar to someone who signs up and actually campaigns to be in this body, a desire to serve. But we don't get it all right in this body as well. I strongly support this package of legislation. We need to do a better job. This is an opportunity. It's unfortunate that it's taken our society and currently the situation in Oregon for us to get here, but this is an opportunity for us to raise the bar and raise the professionalism in a profession that I committed my working life to. Thank you.